Welcome to History's Mysteries, a place where the echoes of the past linger in the quiet of night. Here, forgotten worlds awaken softly, and the stories of time unfold like dreams. So settle in, breathe deeply, and let history whisper you to sleep. The Bermuda Triangle, myths of the deep. The sea stretches endlessly, its surface rippling with blue fire beneath a sinking sun. Between the coasts of Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico lies a vast and restless expanse, an invisible triangle upon the map, but one that has stirred fear and fascination for centuries. They call it the Bermuda Triangle, a name whispered with both awe and apprehension, for within its watery borders, ships have vanished, planes have fallen from clear skies, and men have disappeared as though swallowed by the deep itself. The air above this region hums strangely, alive with unseen currents. Compass needles quiver, radio signals dissolve into static, and the line between sky and water seems to blur. Those who have crossed this domain tell of sudden squalls that rise from calm seas, of luminous clouds pulsing like veins of light, of ghostly shapes that drift beneath the surface, ancient and unidentifiable. It is a place that seems almost sentient, as if the ocean itself were guarding a secret. Mariners of old charted it cautiously, drawing small skulls and question marks upon their maps, warning future sailors of dead waters. To some, it was a portal to another world. To others, the ruins of one long forgotten. The first whispers came centuries ago, in the age of exploration. Spanish galleons vanished en route from the New World, their holds heavy with silver and gold. Survivors, few as they were, spoke of a sea that boiled beneath them, of lights in the sky that shimmered like liquid glass. Christopher Columbus himself recorded strange lights hovering over the waters as he neared these latitudes in 1492, describing them as dancing fire in the sky. His compass, he wrote, refused to point north. As the centuries unfolded, the legend deepened. The triangle became a riddle written in waves, a realm where reason faltered. The SS Marine Sulphur Queen, the Cyclops, the Star Tiger, Flight 19. Their names echo through time, each swallowed whole by the same haunted stretch of sea. Each disappearance added another layer to the myth, another entry in the silent logbook of the abyss. But the story of the Bermuda Triangle is not only one of loss, it is a mirror, reflecting mankind's endless curiosity about the unknown. Scientists, sailors, dreamers, and storytellers have all gazed into its depths, seeking truth among the shadows. Some see nature's fury, others see something far older, beyond the reach of modern understanding. At dusk, the sea takes on a strange stillness. The wind softens and the horizon fades into a violet haze. Beneath the surface, cold currents twist like living things. Deep within those unseen waters lie trenches that fall miles below the light. Valleys filled with thermal vents that breathe like sleeping giants. There are places where compasses whirl, not from magnetism, but from the subtle bending of the Earth's magnetic field. Invisible rivers of force that ripple beneath the crust. It is as though the planet itself murmurs through this region, speaking in the language of storms. And yet, for all the scientific theories, methane hydrates, rogue waves, magnetic anomalies, there is something deeper here, something ancient, for in every myth there lingers a fragment of memory. Sailors of the Caribbean once told tales of an island that rose and sank like a ghost, seen only at dawn. The Arawak people spoke of a sea gate, a place where spirits crossed into the underworld. Later, the legend would merge with whispers of Atlantis, the sunken kingdom said to lie somewhere beneath these waters. It is easy to imagine that if any place on Earth still bore the scars of that lost civilization, it would be here, beneath the turquoise veil of the Bermuda Triangle. In 1969, a diver named Robert Payne descended off the coast of Bimini, chasing such a rumour. What he found astonished the world. Rows of massive limestone blocks stretching for hundreds of feet under the sea. Perfectly aligned, they looked like an ancient road, leading straight into the deep. The Bimini Road, they called it. Some said it was proof, a remnant of Atlantis. Others claimed it was nothing more than nature's geometry. But to those who have seen it in the shifting half-light beneath the waves, the feeling is unmistakable, a sense that the stones remember. From above, the triangle seems placid, a tourist paradise, its islands gleaming beneath the sun. Yet, beneath the glittering surface lies a graveyard of history. Wreckage litters the ocean floor. Wooden ribs of 18th century ships, engines from vanished aircraft, relics of human ambition strewn like bones across the sand. But deeper still, below where light fades entirely, sonar has captured shapes that defy classification. Symmetrical structures, too perfect for coral, too deliberate for accident. Even the sea life behaves oddly here. Fishermen tell of glowing eels and transparent jellyfish rising from the deep during moonless nights. Pilots describe strange mists that shimmer with static, swallowing their planes like breath. And in rare cases, survivors who have returned from the Triangle speak of lost time. Minutes, hours, even days unaccounted for, as if reality itself had paused and resumed without them. One such account came from Commander Benjamin Britten, who flew through the Triangle in 1970. His instruments failed, the sky turned white, and when he emerged, he found his plane hundreds of miles from his last known position. His clock had stopped for 10 minutes. His fuel consumption was impossibly low. Scientists could not explain it, and Britain himself never flew that route again. The sea remembers, and it guards what it keeps. At night, the waters near Bermuda glow faintly. A natural bioluminescence, they say, born of plankton and tiny organisms stirred by the current. But when you gaze upon that glow from the deck of a ship, watching it trail like light spilled across ink, you can almost believe it is something more. A pulse, a heartbeat, a signal from the deep. There are old logbooks that speak of ships sailing into storms that never should have been there, of clouds that form in perfect hexagons, stretching across miles of ocean, each edge sharp as if cut by some celestial hand. Modern satellites have seen them too, immense patterns carved into the weather itself, forming and fading with no apparent cause. Could they be natural phenomena? Likely so, and yet one cannot shake the sense that something intelligent moves within them, not a creature of flesh and bone, but of energy and pattern, as old as the planet itself. Some researchers believe that electromagnetic forces, drawn from the crust of the Earth, create vortices here, gateways where gravity bends ever so slightly, where the rules of distance and time blur at the edges. Perhaps the triangle is not a place of death at all, but of passage. Imagine the ocean not as a surface, but as a fabric, rippling, stretching, folding upon itself. Beneath the right conditions, perhaps that fabric opens, not wide enough to swallow continents, but enough to let a ship, a plane, or a moment slip through into another layer of the same world, unseen by the eyes of men. The idea may seem like fantasy, but every myth begins as an attempt to explain what reason cannot. Even now, ships chart these waters daily, carrying tourists, freight, and hope. Satellites watch from above, their sensors cutting through clouds and storms, and yet, every year, something new goes missing. Not always catastrophically, but quietly, unremarkably. A distress call half-formed, a radar echo that flickers and fades. The sea closes and the silence returns. In the stillness between waves, one might almost hear it. A low hum beneath the wind, as if the ocean were speaking to itself. Some divers say that in the depths off Bimini, if you listen closely, you can hear a deep, rhythmic sound, like distant thunder, when no storm exists above. Scientists call it the Bimini resonance, an unexplained vibration that seems to pulse from beneath the seafloor. It's faint, but unmistakable, as if something vast stirs in its sleep. Night falls swiftly over the triangle. Stars vanish behind drifting clouds, and the horizon dissolves into black. The waves gleam with faint light, and the air carries the scent of rain and salt. Somewhere out there, in the endless blue, a storm is building. Not yet visible, but sensed. A quiet warning in the pressure of the air. And beneath that calm, the deep begins to whisper. The storm begins without warning. First comes the static, a low vibration that prickles across the skin, rising through the hull of a ship like an unseen current. Then the clouds roll in, thick and fast, devouring the sky. The air smells of iron and electricity. Waves swell, not violently, but with an eerie rhythm, as if something beneath them is breathing in time with the wind. For centuries, sailors caught within such storms have reported the same uncanny silence before the tempest breaks, a stillness so complete it feels wrong. Birds vanish, engines falter, the compasses spin, and then, from nowhere, lightning begins to flicker across the horizon. Not jagged bolts, but curtains of pale blue light, rippling soundlessly across the heavens. It is in such moments that the line between the natural and the impossible blurs. In 1945, a squadron of Navy bombers known as Flight 19 disappeared while on a routine training mission over these waters. The pilots' voices, recorded in the last minutes of transmission, trembled with confusion. "We can't tell where we are," one said. "Everything looks strange, even the ocean." Their compasses failed, their bearings drifted, and the last words received were filled with quiet dread. "We can't be sure of any direction. Even the sea doesn't look right." Hours later, a search plane sent to find them also vanished. No wreckage was ever found. Modern explanations cite disorientation, magnetic flux, and human error. But to those who listen to the deep pulse of this sea, something about those words lingers. Even the sea doesn't look right. What could make an ocean look wrong to men who knew it so well? Perhaps the surface itself bends, a mirage not of light, but of reality. Perhaps they saw not the sea as it was, but as it once had been. The triangle has long been a crossroads of time and tide. Beneath its surface, oceanic ridges collide and fracture, releasing plumes of heat and methane gas that shimmer through the water like molten glass. Scientists have mapped these plumes, but some divers insist that what they've seen beneath them defies geology. Columns of light, pulsing like living pillars, rising from fissures in the sea floor and vanishing into the darkness above. One diver, a man named Alejandro Cruz, claimed that while exploring near the Puerto Rican Trench, he encountered something extraordinary. His instruments malfunctioned at a depth of 3,000 feet. His watch stopped. The water grew warmer, shimmering with pale light, and for a brief instant, he said, he saw outlines of structures, towers of coral and stone carved into impossible symmetry. Then, in an instant, the light faded, and the sea returned to black. When Cruz surfaced, 3 hours had passed. To him, it felt like minutes. The triangle is vast, stretching across 500,000 square miles, yet it holds its secrets close. There are places within it where the water seems denser, heavier, where sound travels strangely, where sonar pings echo for seconds longer than they should. Submariners report currents that twist like ropes, dragging objects sideways rather than downward. It is as if the very geometry of space folds upon itself here, curving invisibly in the deep. Some physicists have proposed that natural magnetic anomalies could bend electromagnetic fields, warping navigational instruments. Others whisper of something more exotic. Micro wormholes, brief distortions in space-time, small as raindrops, yet powerful enough to distort perception. Most dismiss the idea as science fiction. What if those anomalies are ancient? What if they've always been here? Silent gateways between the world we know and the world that waits beyond? When storms churn above, the triangle becomes a living thing. Winds roar in spirals, and lightning descends like veins of fire into the waves. From the decks of passing ships, clouds seem to twist around invisible cores, spiraling into the sea and then back into the heavens. Pilots have reported flying through holes in storms, brief tunnels of light surrounded by walls of cloud. For seconds they see nothing but blinding radiance, then emerge into still air, miles away from where their instruments said they were. Is it mere turbulence, or something deeper, guiding them through unseen paths in the sky? Legends tell of ships appearing years after they vanished. In 1955, a cargo vessel named Coney Moth was sighted drifting east of Nassau. It had disappeared 10 years earlier without trace. When the Coast Guard boarded, they found tables set, lights working, but not a soul aboard. The chronometers all stopped at the same moment. There were no signs of struggle, no damage, only silence, and a lingering smell of ozone in the air. In maritime archives, there are dozens of similar accounts. They are written off as folklore, coincidences, or misreported sightings. But if even one were true, it would suggest that the triangle is not a graveyard, but a gate, one that sometimes opens both ways. Some say the secret lies not in the sea, but below it. Oceanographers have long speculated that beneath the crust of the Atlantic, ancient ruins lie buried, perhaps remnants of a prehistoric civilization erased by cataclysm. The Kaisal Bank, west of Bimini, is dotted with submerged terraces that appear carved, not formed. Sonar scans show symmetrical walls and rectangular plateaus aligned along cardinal directions. Nature rarely builds with such precision. Could it be Atlantis, as Plato once described? A realm swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. If so, the Bermuda Triangle may not be a curse, but a scar. The wound left behind when a civilization vanished beneath the waves. The myths speak of crystal power, of energy harnessed from the earth itself. What if such forces remain, still humming beneath the seabed, interfering with our machines, bending the fabric of magnetic north, and pulling at the edges of time? The ancients may have understood things we no longer grasp, ways of channeling the planet's resonance, tuning it as one might tune an instrument. If such energy still lingers, then perhaps every compass that spins, every plane that vanishes, is but a note struck from an ancient song the earth once knew. Night returns to the sea. The wind cools and the waves glitter with ghostly fire. Somewhere below, the trench yawns wide, a black chasm swallowing light. Within that silence, something moves, not creature, not machine, but memory itself. Imagine descending through that darkness. The last traces of sunlight fade. The pressure grows immense, yet the water is calm. The beam of a submersible cuts through the gloom, illuminating shapes half buried in sediment. Smooth pillars, worn by centuries, etched with patterns no current culture can read. A faint hum vibrates through the metal hull. Instruments flicker, and for one breathless instant, the explorer feels it, a pulse through the ocean, deep and steady, like a heartbeat from another age. It is then you understand. The sea is not silent. It remembers everything. Every lost ship, every drowned whisper, every spark of lightning that ever touched its skin. The Bermuda Triangle is an archive, written in tides instead of ink. And above it all, the wind carries the stories we tell, stories of ghosts, of vanished fleets, of skies that open and seas that glow. Myths are born from terror, perhaps, but also from wonder, for there is something profoundly human in the urge to name the unknown, to give shape to mystery, even if that shape is fear. The truth, perhaps, is simpler and more profound. The Bermuda Triangle is not a single place, but a symbol of all that remains unexplained, a mirror reflecting both nature's power and our own limits. Storms, magnetic fields, methane eruptions. These are the bones of the mystery, but the soul of it lies in what we feel when we stare into that horizon, awe, reverence, and a whisper of something beyond comprehension. Still, there are those who will not rest until they know. Every year, expeditions dive deeper, fly farther, and scan wider, and sometimes they bring back more questions than answers. Instruments record anomalies that vanish upon replay. GPS logs show the craft jumping impossible distances. Deep-sea microphones capture low rhythmic tones echoing from miles below, too structured to be random, too faint to trace. In 2022, a research drone sent to map the seabed off Andros Island vanished after reporting a sudden drop in temperature and pressure. When contact was re-established minutes later, it was 27 miles from its last known position, on a flat plain of sand. The data it recorded in those missing minutes was fragmented, filled with bursts of electromagnetic interference. But between the noise, there was a pattern, 3 pulses repeating at perfect intervals, like a beacon. The ocean, it seems, was speaking again. If one were to listen to the sea long enough, perhaps they would hear its story, not of curses or disappearances, but of memory. For even myths have purpose. They remind us that the world is not entirely known, that beyond the edges of certainty lies wonder, waiting like a current beneath calm waters. The Bermuda Triangle endures because it is both real and imagined. Real in its storms, its shifting magnetic lines, and its hidden trenches. Imagined in its ghosts, time slips and its lost cities. Yet between those two truths lies something deeper, the uncharted space where fact and faith converge. It is there, in that shimmer between science and myth, that the triangle truly lives. And so, the legend continues, whispered across harbors and flight decks, printed in logbooks, dreamt of by those who sail too far or fly too high. The sea keeps its secrets, but not out of malice. It keeps them because they're part of what makes it eternal. For if every mystery were solved, the ocean would lose its voice. The wind calms, the stars return, the storm drifts east, dissolving into distant thunder. The triangle sleeps again, vast, silent, unknowable, but somewhere below, in the unseen chambers of the deep, the lights still pulse faintly in the dark, tracing forgotten lines across the seabed. And if you listen closely, if you stand upon the deck of a ship beneath that moonlit sky, feeling the weight of the horizon pressing gently against your chest, you might hear it too, a hum, soft and endless, echoing up through the hull, a sound, not of danger, but of memory. The sea, alive and aware, remembering every story ever told within it. The myths of the deep are still unfolding. The world at the bottom of the globe has always been a mystery. Even now, as satellites sweep its white expanse and research stations hum through the endless cold, something about Antarctica feels older than time. Long before its name was carved into maps, it existed only as rumor, the unknown southern land. Mariners believed that for the world to balance, there must be another continent far to the south, mirroring the great lands of the north. They did not know that beneath the ice, the balance they sought had already been broken once, long ago. Terra Australis Incognita. It begins with a map. In 1513, the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis sketched a chart of the world. He claimed to have compiled it from ancient sources, some Greek, some Phoenician, some perhaps older still. When modern historians examined it, they found something impossible. The lower edge of his map showed the coast of Antarctica, not as it appears today, frozen and buried beneath miles of ice, but as it would have been thousands of years earlier, ice-free and detailed in a way no sailor of the 1500s could have known. Mountains and inlets matched the contour of Queen Maud Land, as revealed only centuries later by seismic surveys. How could a 16th century admiral have known the shape of a continent lost under 2 miles of ice? Some scholars waved the mystery aside as coincidence, yet others whispered that the Piri Reis map was a memory of a forgotten world. In the early 1800s, explorers such as James Cook and Fabian von Bellingshausen circled the southern seas. Their journals spoke of endless pack ice, of days when the horizon itself froze into glass. Yet among their notes lay an unease. Cook wrote of earth-coloured snow, as though volcanic dust or ancient soil had bled upward through the weakness. In a few places his men found rounded stones, smoothed by water, on beaches where no river ran. It was as if Antarctica remembered rivers it no longer had. By 1911, when Amundsen reached the South Pole and planted the flag of Norway, the world congratulated itself on having conquered the last great wilderness. But a few of the scientists who followed him south began to sense that the continent's silence was not emptiness, it was concealment. Fossils of ferns and tree trunks emerged from the exposed rock of the transantarctic mountains, proof that this frozen place had once been green. Later, in the 1970s, Drilling cores would reveal pollen from broad-leafed forests dated to 40 million years ago. Yet between the lines of those reports was another question. Had the warmth lasted even longer than scientists dared to admit? Long enough, perhaps, for humans, or something like them, to have walked those shores before the Great Freezing began. In 1939, a German expedition landed on the Queen Maud coast. Officially it was for whaling and mapping, but among the documents later declassified after the war, there were photographs of geometric shadows under the ice. Triangular forms too regular to be natural. Some dismissed them as crevasse illusions. Others, especially those who had seen the Piri Reis map, believed they had found the outline of ancient structures buried in the glacial crust. Half a century later, when satellites began measuring gravitational anomalies, they detected strange densities beneath that same region, shapes of stone unlike mountain ranges, clustered in hexagonal patterns beneath miles of compacted ice. To the public, these results were written off as data noise. Yet a few researchers quietly passed the coordinates from one generation to another. The secret that linked them was a name found in an Egyptian fragment. The Nasura Tables, a set of broken inscriptions describing a land south of all lands where the gods had once hidden their halls. The hieroglyphs spoke of frozen waters above mountains, and pillars that sleep beneath the white sky. For centuries it was assumed to be myth, perhaps a poetic metaphor for death, but the tables also included a sequence of star positions corresponding to roughly 10,500 BCE, the same alignment recorded on the Giza Plateau. If both sites referred to the same epoch, the implication was staggering. Civilization, as we define it, did not begin in Sumer or Egypt, but somewhere else, long before the last ice age ended. Modern geology tells us that around 12,000 years ago, Earth's climate changed abruptly. Ice sheets collapsed, sea levels rose, and entire coastlines vanished. To most historians, this is the boundary between prehistory and history, the dawn of agriculture, the birth of settled life. But to a handful of fringe scholars and explorers, it marks something else. The erasure of a world advanced enough to leave maps, myths, and perhaps ruins, now locked beneath Antarctica's frozen cap. In 1958, when the International Geophysical Year opened Antarctica to global scientific collaboration, several nations began deep core drilling to study ice strata. One Soviet team working near Lake Vostok detected odd temperature gradients and magnetic interference. Their logs mention artificial heat signatures more than 2 miles down, as though some metallic body, warmer than its surroundings, lay buried there. The report was quietly sealed, and the team relocated. When Western scientists requested the raw data, they were told it had been lost in transmission. Decades later, satellite radar confirmed the existence of Lake Vostok itself, a vast body of liquid water trapped beneath 4 kilometers of ice, isolated for millions of years. And yet, at its eastern edge, sensors detected straight lines and right angles along the lakebed, the geometry of architecture, not geology. In 1999, a joint Russian-American project attempted to lower instruments through a borehole toward the subglacial lake. The feed transmitted for only seconds before cutting out, but those seconds were enough to show what looked like carved basalt walls descending into darkness. The images were dismissed publicly as noise, pixel artifacts. Unofficially, they were copied and stored under restricted classification. What lies beneath Vostok is still unknown. but some of those who saw the first data spoke of an arrangement resembling a city grid extending for kilometers. The idea of an Antarctic civilization was once dismissed as fantasy, a companion to legends of Atlantis. Yet if one steps back and reads the evidence not as myth but as memory, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Cultures from Egypt to the Andes preserve tales of luminous teachers, of gods who arrived from a land of ice, teaching astronomy and geometry, then vanishing when the world drowned. The pre-Incan legends of Viracocha, the Sumerian accounts of Enki, even the Hopi stories of the ant people, all speak of a race that survived a great flood by retreating beneath the world. Could these be echoes of refugees from a continent destroyed by the sudden onset of ice? Geologists studying Antarctica's crust have long noted its peculiar thickness, as if vast constructions or dense foundations once underlay it. The continent's bedrock is divided into two masses, East and West Antarctica, connected by a rift valley filled with volcanic ridges. Some seismic readings show cavities hundreds of meters tall within those ridges. Officially, they are lava tubes. Yet when the US Navy conducted Operation High Jump in 1947, a massive expedition involving ships, aircraft, and over 4,000 men, the mission's declassified goals included aerial mapping and testing of cold weather equipment. Unofficially, its logs describe flights encountering sudden warm air pockets, fog banks that interfered with compasses, and glimpses of dark openings in the ice cliffs. Admiral Byrd, who commanded the operation, later wrote in a private note that he had seen a land beyond the pole, lush and green, over which flew creatures unlike any known. Critics dismissed this as exhaustion or poetic metaphor, but Byrd's words, written before his death, include coordinates that point directly toward the sector where those gravitational anomalies still persist. Scientists today insist Antarctica has been buried beneath ice for at least 14 million years, but ice cores are dated by trapped atmospheric gases, not by the materials below. If a rapid crustal shift displaced an earlier temperate region southward, a theory proposed by Charles Hapgood in the 1950s and once endorsed by Einstein himself, then the civilization that mapped its coastlines could indeed have existed within human memory, later frozen in place when the continent slid into polar latitudes. Einstein's marginal note to Hapgood reads, "I find your idea fascinating, and it could explain much that otherwise appears impossible." To many, it remains just that. Impossible. Yet explorers who have stood on the ice know that Antarctica defies ordinary time. In the silence between katabatic winds, there are moments when the air itself seems to hum, as if resonating with something buried deep below. Late in the austral summer of 2016, a Chilean research outpost detected low-frequency vibrations that repeated every 19 hours. Seismographs traced them to a point beneath the Wilkesland anomaly, a region already known for its magnetic irregularities. The waves pulsed like a mechanical rhythm, not a natural tremor. When the recordings were analyzed, the pattern matched the mathematical ratio of 3 to 2 to 1, a harmonic sequence often used in ancient architecture. The following year, satellite imagery of that same zone showed a circular depression nearly 400 kilometers wide, partially obscured by snowdrifts. To the untrained eye, it looked like an impact crater, but its edges were smooth, its center unusually flat, as if not from a collision, but from subsidence. Beneath it, gravity readings suggested a dense metallic structure 3 kilometers down, No natural process could explain its symmetry. When this data reached a handful of independent analysts, one of them, a geophysicist named Dr. Lena Voronin, compared the dimensions to known ancient sites. The ratio of its diameter to depth matched precisely that of the Great Pyramid of Giza, magnified 1,000-fold. She proposed that both were built upon the same geometric principles, a planetary grid once mapped by a civilization that understood Earth's energy lines. Her paper was quietly withdrawn from publication. Within months, she accepted a private research position in the Southern Hemisphere. She has not been heard from publicly since, and so the story returns to silence. The same silence that has always cloaked Antarctica. The silence of white horizons and buried time. But beneath the weight of ice and secrecy, the pattern remains. Maps that should not exist. Magnetic fields that hum with artificial order. Legends that converge on a single idea that our history began, not in the Fertile Crescent, but on a continent now locked in eternal winter. The ice does not forget, and in its depths, the past waits, preserved in crystalline stillness. The ice does not forget. It holds every flake of fallen snow, every breath of vanished air. Layer by layer, year by year, it keeps its memories in silence. Beneath that silence, something older than memory still sleeps. In the austral winter of 2017, a multinational team quietly assembled under the guise of climate research. Their true purpose was buried within encrypted funding documents. Subglacial Structure Survey, Wilkes Land Sector. The team's base sat on a plateau of compressed snow, its prefab walls groaning in the wind. There were 12 of them, geophysicists, engineers, linguists, and one historian whose name appears nowhere in the official record. They were told they would be drilling to sample ice composition. They were not told what the coordinates truly signified. The borehole descended through 3 kilometers of ice, a smooth column of darkness lined with sensors. For days, the readings were normal. Pressure, temperature, mineral content. Then, one evening, the seismograph spiked. A pulse rippled upward from below, steady, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of stone. Instruments registered an energy surge, brief, faint, but organized. The historian, a quiet man named Avery Holt, noted in his field journal, "The pattern repeats in harmonic thirds. This is not seismic noise. It is intention." When the drill reached bedrock, the bit struck something smooth, metallic, hollow. For a long moment, no one spoke. The geologist on duty wiped frost from the monitor, staring at the reflection of an impossible surface. Polished, curved, neither rock nor ice. They withdrew the bit, lowered a fiber optic camera, and saw darkness giving way to geometry. Parallel grooves intersecting at perfect angles. A doorway. Orders came from the sponsoring agency to halt operations and await instructions. Instead, the team sealed the radio room and continued. Their final transmission, later leaked, contained 4 words before static consumed it. "We are inside now." No official recovery team ever reached that site. Weeks later, a satellite flyover recorded that the entire outpost had collapsed into a sinkhole more than 100 meters wide. The coordinates were declared unsafe for further drilling. Yet in 2019, a Swedish research drone skimming low across the region captured faint magnetic interference at the same location, an oscillating field still active beneath the snow. What the lost expedition found has never been verified, but fragments of their data cache, recovered from a secondary server in Christchurch, revealed a series of images. Corridors carved from black basalt, their walls inlaid with metallic filigree that glowed faintly blue. One frame showed symbols etched into stone, spirals, triangles, and a form resembling an eye enclosed within concentric circles. Holt's notes attached to the file read simply, "Same sequence as Göbekli Tepe, mirrored." If true, it meant that the oldest known temple on Earth shared an inscription pattern with something buried beneath Antarctica. Göbekli Tepe dates to at least 9,600 BCE, the very era when ice began to seize the southern world. Across the next few years, whispers spread through academic circles. A handful of climatologists who had analysed deep core anomalies were reassigned or retired abruptly. One, Dr. Amira Chen, gave a single interview before vanishing from public life. "The isotopic data doesn't lie," she said. "Something released heat from within the continent about 12,000 years ago, fast enough to melt localized sections from below. Not volcanic, not tectonic. Controlled, as if the land defended itself." When asked what she meant, she only replied, "There are mechanisms under that ice older than us." The notion of mechanisms would have seemed absurd a century earlier, but radar mapping in the 2020s uncovered regular rectangular voids stretching in linear paths hundreds of kilometers long beneath the Ross ice shelf. Officially, these were interpreted as subglacial channels. Unofficially, a few analysts compared their spacing to the street grids of ancient cities. One even overlaid the pattern upon a transparent projection of Plato's description of Atlantis. The ratios matched within 5%. The legend of Atlantis had always pointed west, toward the Atlantic, yet Plato's original Greek text never specifies an ocean, only beyond the Pillars of Heracles, southward where ice and fire meet scholars. Later assumed this meant the Strait of Gibraltar, but some linguists now argue that beyond the pillars could refer to the southern pillars of the world, the limits of navigation, the edge of the known sea. Perhaps he meant the Antarctic. In 2024, during an unprecedented heatwave, a section of the Thwaites Glacier calved, exposing dark stone beneath. Satellite photographs showed angular formations protruding through the ice, rectilinear, tiered, distinctly architectural. Within days, the imagery was scrubbed from public databases, replaced by lower resolution composites. But not before several researchers downloaded the originals. One geologist described the formations as step pyramid fragments the size of city blocks. Another noted an unmistakable feature, a colossal archway oriented toward true north. True north, not magnetic. Whoever built it had understood planetary geometry long before compasses existed. The story might have ended there, folded into myth again, if not for what followed. As the glacier retreated further, a subglacial cave opened near the Weddell Sea. Inside, expedition drones recorded air temperatures far above freezing and a faint luminescent haze. When the footage was analysed, it revealed crystalline pillars rising from an obsidian floor, each carved with glyphs that pulsed faintly, almost like breathing. Spectral analysis suggested the light came from bioluminescent microorganisms, but the pattern of their glow repeated mathematical sequences found in human DNA. No one could explain how life had survived there, sealed off for millennia, yet perfectly adapted to emit coded light. Some speculated that these organisms were descendants of surface species trapped during the sudden glaciation, evolving in isolation. Others whispered that they were engineered, biological recorders left behind by the civilization that vanished. The oldest myths on record, Sumerian, Mayan, Egyptian, all speak of beings who preserved knowledge through light and sound. Perhaps in this cave beneath Antarctica, that metaphor had always been literal. Holt's recovered journal pages end abruptly, but his final entry reads, "Language is vibration. If they stored it in living cells, it would last forever." After 2025, multiple governments restricted civilian flights over several Antarctic sectors. The official explanation cited environmental protection. Yet private satellite operators noticed new installations, rectangular facilities buried under white domes, their layouts aligned precisely along ley line coordinates identified by Hapgood decades earlier. Energy signatures from those sites corresponded to microwave transmissions, bouncing between stations in rhythmic bursts. Whatever was being studied, it was communicating with itself. As years passed, climate change exposed more of the continent's hidden past. Petrified forests emerged from melting ice cliffs. Beneath them, scattered obsidian fragments shaped like tools. Carbon dating was impossible. The material was too old, its isotopes long decayed. But under electron microscopy, each shard revealed microscopic engravings, fine, spiraled grooves resembling a kind of data storage far beyond primitive carving. Scientists from the University of Melbourne compare them to optical discs, capable of encoding vast information in three-dimensional lattices. "We might be holding their library," one researcher whispered, "and we can't even read the cover." The deeper the ice retreated, the clearer the pattern became. Symmetrical terraces, parallel ridges, and in one case, a perfectly circular depression 2 kilometers across, its rim dotted with monoliths. The arrangement matched the lunar cycle when viewed from the sky. Whoever designed it had built the calendar you could see from orbit. In time, the debate shifted from if to who. Some believed these were the last survivors of an antediluvian culture that spanned the globe, a civilization destroyed by its own mastery over nature. Others proposed that what lay beneath the ice was not human at all, but something that preceded humanity, guiding its evolution through encoded myth. Yet the quiet consensus among those few who had seen the data firsthand was simpler, and perhaps more haunting, that our ancestors once knew this place, called it home, and lost it to a catastrophe they could neither prevent nor fully forget. When people settled again in warmer lands, they carried fragments of that memory, stories of floods and shining teachers, of stars that guided builders to recreate what had been lost. Egypt's pyramids, Tiwanaku's temples, the Nazca lines, even Stonehenge, each a faint echo of the geometry first perfected in the far south. The blueprint of civilization itself may have been Antarctic in origin. By 2035, an independent research collective named Project Eternum announced a startling discovery. Beneath the Ameri ice shelf, sonar readings revealed a vast dome structure composed of interlocking hexagonal plates. Each plate resonated when struck by seismic pulses, producing harmonic tones that modulated across frequencies similar to human speech. When the team transmitted simple sine waves back into the ice, the structure responded, altering its frequency as if in dialogue. Within hours, the collective's online data feed went dark. Official channels denied the experiment had ever occurred, but a backup of the transmission, circulated quietly among academics, captured the final exchange. The returning signal formed a pattern that, when converted into visual spectrum, revealed a single image, a spiral galaxy centered upon a triangle pointing upward, mirrored by another pointing down, the symbol of above and below. As above, so below, the oldest sign of balance. It was as if the ice itself had spoken, reminding us that what was lost still endures in reflection. Today, Antarctica remains closed to nearly all unsanctioned exploration. Researchers work under strict observation, their findings filtered before publication. Yet satellite anomalies continue to appear. Heat blooms where no volcanoes exist. Magnetic lines that pulse in sync with lunar cycles. Every decade, new theories emerge and fade, but the whispers persist. The map was right. The myths were memories. The ice is only a veil. If one could stand at the South Pole on a windless night and listen closely, perhaps they would hear it, the faint hum rising through the frozen earth, like the low note of an immense instrument tuned to the heartbeat of the planet. Some say it is the cry of shifting glaciers. Others, the breath of a civilization dreaming beneath its own tomb. Imagine descending through the miles of ice, through centuries of snowfall compacted into translucent glass. The air grows warm, tinged with mineral sweetness. Below, light glimmers, soft, blue, alive. You step into a cavern vast as a city, its walls carved with spirals that seem to move when you breathe. A river of liquid water winds through arches of obsidian, reflecting constellations no longer visible in the night sky. In the center stands a pillar engraved with patterns that match the human genome. At its base, the words, or their ancestor, spiral inward. We became the memory, so the world would begin again. Perhaps that is the hidden truth of Antarctica. Not merely a lost civilization, but a seed vault of consciousness, preserved in ice until humanity was ready to remember. Every myth, every fragment, every inexplicable leap in knowledge may be echoes awakening as the planet warms and the veil thins. And maybe, one day soon, when the last sheet of ice slips into the sea, the halls beneath will breathe again. Machines will hum, lights will rise, and the forgotten architects of the world will look upon their descendants and know that the long winter has finally ended. Until then, the continent sleeps, its mountains whispering beneath auroras, its lakes sealed in glass, its truths frozen between time and silence. The wind that circles it carries an ancient rhythm, the same measured pulse, felt by every explorer who has ever stood upon its threshold. The ice does not forget, it waits, and somewhere deep within that waiting, humanity is listening back. The vanishing of Atlantis, legend or memory? The sea is quiet tonight, a slow rhythmic hush rolls across the dark waters, the sound of a world that remembers what men have long forgotten. Beneath the endless surface of the Atlantic, where light fades into eternal twilight, lie the whispers of an island that once was, and perhaps still is, beneath the waves. They call it Atlantis, the lost realm of splendor and pride, a civilization swallowed whole by the wrath of the sea. The story begins, as so many do, with a voice from antiquity. Around 360 BCE, in the halls of Athens, the philosopher Plato told his students a tale recorded from an elder Egyptian priest, a story so ancient that even Egypt considered it old. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato described a powerful island kingdom beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. It was a land of wide plains and snow-tipped mountains, rich in gold, silver, and orichalcum, a metal that gleamed like fire. There, a mighty people had built temples that shone in the sun, harbors alive with ships and palaces adorned with bronze and ivory. They called it Atlantis, named for Atlas, the titan who held the heavens. Plato said the Atlanteans were once noble, descendants of gods and men ruled by wisdom. Their capital was a marvel of geometry and grace, concentric rings of land and sea, guarded by bridges and gates, where fountains of warm and cold water flowed from the earth itself. Gardens flourished, statues rose in golden light, and the sound of music drifted through the night air. But as centuries passed, power bred arrogance, and the hearts of men turned from virtue to conquest. The Atlanteans, once lovers of truth and harmony, began to covet the lands beyond their own. Their armies sailed eastward across the sea, seeking to subdue the peoples of the Mediterranean. It was then that the gods, seeing their corruption, decided to humble them. In a single day and night of misfortune, the island was swallowed by the sea. For thousands of years, the world has debated whether Plato's story was a parable or a memory. Was it a philosopher's allegory for moral decline, or the faint echo of a cataclysm that truly occurred in prehistory? The answer drifts between myth and geology, between the philosopher's ink and the ocean's silence. Across centuries, countless explorers and scholars have searched for the lost realm. Some placed it near the Azores, where underwater plateaus hint at once sunken lands. Others pointed to the Mediterranean itself, to Crete, Santorini, and the shattered remains of Thera. In 1600 BCE, the island of Thera exploded in a fury of fire and ash, its Minoan civilization buried beneath pumice and sea. Could this be the memory that seeded the legend? When the eruption tore through the Aegean, it destroyed fleets, blackened skies, and sent waves across the coasts of Greece and Egypt. For those who survived, it would have seemed as though the world itself had drowned. In this way, perhaps, memory became myth. Yet, some whisper that the story is older still. Long before the Greeks, ancient peoples spoke of floods and vanishing lands. The Sumerians told of Eridu, the first city destroyed by rising waters. The Hebrews remembered Noah. The Hindus spoke of Manu, the lone survivor of a great deluge. Even in the Americas, tales of sunken worlds persisted, from the Mayans' lost Aztlan to the Aztec homeland said to lie beyond the Western Sea. Could all these myths be threads of a single memory, carried through time like driftwood after a storm? The ocean floor, silent though it seems, bears scars of catastrophe. Sonar maps reveal mountain ranges drowned beneath miles of water and plateaus that once saw the sun. The mid-Atlantic ridge rises like a vast spine through the sea, stretching from the Arctic to the southern oceans. Along its length are peaks and valleys, some now buried beneath silt, some crowned by volcanic cones. Scientists call it tectonic movement. Poets call it the graveyard of lost worlds. Those who dream of Atlantis often imagine an age before recorded time, when humankind had risen to heights long forgotten. They picture gleaming towers, advanced ships, and knowledge of the stars far beyond the bronze tools of early Greece. Some say the Atlanteans understood the movement of the heavens, could harness the energy of the earth itself, and possessed machines that hummed with the power of crystal light. Others dismiss it as fantasy, a projection of modern wonder onto the blank canvas of myth. But even fantasy is born from memory, and memory, no matter how faint, is rarely without origin. Imagine it then, as it might have been. The sun rising over vast marble temples, the scent of salt and lotus drifting through the air. Waterways gleamed like mirrors between golden causeways. Children chased one another through colonnades where the shadows of gods were carved in stone. Farmers tended terraced fields above the sea. Fishermen cast nets woven from flax and silk. Priests watched the stars from the tops of obsidian towers, tracing the cycles of the heavens to mark the days of planting and storm. They knew the rhythm of the earth, the subtle trembling before disaster. Yet even they could not stop what came. For days, the ground beneath Atlantis had murmured, a low growl beneath the song of the waves. Springs turned hot, and the air grew heavy with the smell of sulfur. Then, one night, the earth split open. The mountains to the north glowed red with fire, and rivers of flame poured down toward the sea. Temples shuddered, statues fell, and ships were flung against their harbors. Thunder rolled across the heavens, not from the sky, but from the sea itself. Walls of water rose in the moonlight, taller than the tallest tower, and the island trembled as though some ancient hand had struck it. In that moment, Atlantis ceased to be a city and became a storm. When morning came, there was only ocean. Fishermen on distant shores spoke of a strange glow beneath the waves for many nights after. Some said it was the fires of the earth, still burning below. Others swore they heard music carried by the wind, notes of sorrow and beauty drifting from the deep. Even now, sailors crossing those waters tell of strange sounds on calm nights, as if the sea itself remembers the voices of a vanished people. But if Atlantis was real, where did its survivors go? Many legends claim they scattered across the world, bringing fragments of their wisdom to new lands. The Egyptians told of Thoth, the god of knowledge, who came from across the sea bearing scrolls of sacred science. The Mayans spoke of a white-bearded teacher named Kukulkan, who arrived from the east and built their temples. In ancient Sumer, a being called Oannes was said to have emerged from the Persian Gulf, teaching humanity the arts of civilization. Perhaps these were echoes of the same memory, a diaspora of knowledge from a sunken world. Archaeologists have long searched for proof. Tools, writings, architecture, but the ocean keeps its secrets well. Beneath miles of silt and coral, whatever remains of Atlantis sleeps beyond the reach of divers and time. Still, discoveries emerge now and then that ignite the imagination. Off the coast of Cuba, sonar scans in the early 2000s revealed vast geometric structures nearly 2,000 feet below the surface. Pyramids, avenues, and domes, all arranged with eerie precision. Scientists debate whether they are natural formations or ruins too ancient to name. Off Japan's Yonaguni coast, terraces and stairways rise from the seabed, carved into basalt like forgotten monuments. And near Bimini in the Bahamas, divers discovered long lines of stone blocks stretching into the blue. Are these coincidences or reminders? The question endures because it speaks to something deep in the human spirit, the sense that history is older than we remember, that beneath every civilization lies the bones of another. Perhaps Atlantis is not a place, but a symbol, the diurnal cycle of rise and fall, creation and loss. Every empire imagines itself immortal, and every ocean waits. And yet, something in the world still hints at a deeper truth. The alignments of ancient monuments, the shared myths of floods and suns, and the sudden appearance of knowledge in early cultures all suggest that humanity remembers more than it can explain. Perhaps, far back in the mists of time, A real people once watched their world sink beneath the horizon, and their story became legend. What began as eyewitness became parable, then philosophy, and finally dream. Far from the Mediterranean, deep in the Atlantic, the currents whisper through canyons and over drowned plateaus. There, strange shapes loom in the darkness, stone pillars covered in coral, roads that lead nowhere. The ocean hums, its vibrations faint but constant, as though some echo of that vanished world still stirs below. If one were to listen closely, perhaps the sea would tell its story, not of gods or punishment, but of memory itself. And so the question remains, did Atlantis ever truly exist? Or does it live only in the space between memory and myth? Perhaps the answer lies not in the past, but in us, in the faint recognition that somewhere, once, humanity reached farther than we can now imagine, and paid the price of forgetting. The waves move endlessly. The stars above trace their old familiar paths. Somewhere below, a city sleeps, its towers draped in coral, its streets lit by the flicker of bioluminescent fish where torches once burned. And when the moonlight strikes the sea just right, the water seems to shimmer with outlines of rings and walls, as though the ghost of Atlantis still rises, waiting for a dawn that will never come. The currents shift, and we drift deeper into that silence where memory and ocean entwine. Imagine now the seabed, unlit but not lifeless. A vast plain of sand and stone where creatures glide through black water. To most, this is emptiness, but to the earth itself, it is a graveyard of worlds. Sediment layers tell stories in whispers of carbon and ash, each stratum a memory pressed beneath pressure and time. Somewhere among these ancient layers may rest the last trace of Atlantis. Modern science, cautious yet curious, continues to chase that echo. Geologists trace the tectonic scars that cut across the Atlantic basin. They speak of plate boundaries, of rifts and mantle plumes that could have swallowed whole islands. Oceanographers send drones and sonar arrays across the abyss, mapping each ridge and valley. Anthropologists compare myths separated by oceans yet bound by the same refrain, a world drowned, a people lost. What they cannot explain is how such stories persist in every corner of the earth, as if the trauma of one great flood was etched into humanity's collective soul. In Greenland's ice cores, tiny bubbles preserve the air of 10,000 years ago. Within them, scientists have found signs of sudden climate collapse, rapid warming, floods, and volcanic winters. Around 12,000 years before the Common Era, near the end of the last ice age, sea levels rose hundreds of feet as glaciers melted and the ocean reclaimed vast tracts of coastal land. Entire continents shifted shape. What if Atlantis was not one island, but many? Those coastlines swallowed by the returning sea? To the survivors, it would have seemed as though the gods themselves had destroyed their world overnight. Ancient ruins along the world's continental shelves support the thought. Off India's Gulf of Cambay, sonar revealed structures miles long beneath the silt, dated to millennia before Egypt's first pyramids. In the Black Sea, explorers found evidence that the sea had once been a freshwater lake before breaking through its walls in a catastrophic flood, an event that may have inspired the story of Noah. Each discovery blurs the line between myth and memory, suggesting that humanity has lived through cataclysms it barely remembers. Yet beyond the science lies something subtler, the way the story endures in our dreams. Every age rediscovers Atlantis in its own image, For Renaissance scholars, it was the ideal republic, wise and pure. For mystics, it was a realm of lost magic and crystal power. For modern minds, it is an allegory for technological hubris, the warning that progress without wisdom leads to ruin. Plato's moral survives even if the island never did. Civilizations rise, shine, and vanish. The sea of time swallows them all. Still, hope persists that Atlantis was real, waiting in darkness. Expeditions have crossed the globe in search of its bones. In the 19th century, Ignatius Donnelly, a Minnesota congressman turned historian, published Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, arguing that all ancient cultures were descendants of that lost mother civilization. His words stirred the imagination of millions, igniting a century of quests. From the Azores to the Caribbean, from Morocco's coast to Antarctica's icy shelf, seekers have scoured maps and myths for a clue. Each generation uncovers something new, a shard, a ruin, a pattern, and though proof remains elusive, the legend grows stronger, not weaker. Why? Because Atlantis is not merely a place. It is an idea of perfection undone, a mirror held to every human age. It whispers that greatness always carries its own end, that pride calls forth the wave. In this way, whether it sank beneath volcanic fire or never existed at all, Atlantis endures as one of humanity's truest stories. Picture it now in its last moment. The ground heaves, the sea withdraws in eerie silence, revealing glistening sand and gasping fish where harbors once were. People flee toward the highlands, clutching their children, calling the names of gods who no longer answer. A sound builds, deep, immense, like the breath of the world, and the horizon rises into a wall of water. For an instant, the city gleams in the sun, towers of white marble and gold, reflecting light like mirrors of heaven. Then the wave falls. Silence. Centuries later, divers will swim above those same coordinates, unaware of what lies 1,000 fathoms below. The sand conceals streets once crowded with laughter, temples carved with constellations, and libraries filled with the knowledge of forgotten ages. Coral grows upon the lintels of doors that open to no air. In the stillness, a sea turtle drifts through a colonnade, brushing past inscriptions no eye will ever read again. And yet, even here, something remains, the pulse of history itself, faint but unbroken, perhaps in ways we cannot measure. Atlantis never vanished at all. Its knowledge, scattered like seeds, took root wherever survivors set foot. In the design of pyramids, in the myths of floods, and in the memory of stars mapped before telescopes, we see glimpses of its afterlife. Each civilization, in dreaming of its own origin, rediscovers that lost world within itself. The waves above shimmer once more, silver under the moon. To listen to them is to hear time breathing, to hear all that was and all that may come again. Atlantis may be legend, or it may be memory, but between the two lies truth enough to fill an ocean. The years passed, and the legend of the drowned world flowed onward through time like the tide itself, ebbing and returning in each new age. Empires rose, cities burned, and yet the story endured, whispering through the languages of priests, poets, and wanderers. Even as the marble temples of Greece crumbled and Rome's legions vanished into dust, the idea of Atlantis survived, as though some invisible thread kept its name from fading. In the monasteries of medieval Europe, monks copied Plato's dialogues by candlelight. Between the lines of Latin, they found not just philosophy, but mystery. What kind of place could have perished so utterly? What sin could call down such ruin? For them, Atlantis became a warning, a symbol of divine retribution, of paradise lost through pride. As centuries turned, the myth grew richer and darker, embroidered by storytellers who could not bear the thought of such a world simply disappearing. When the age of exploration dawned, the legend stirred again. Sailors crossing the Atlantic looked upon the endless horizon and thought of Plato's vanished land. Columbus himself, before setting sail for the Indies, wrote of a great island once swallowed by the ocean. His crew, staring into mist and foam, believed they might see the peaks of Atlantis rise from the deep. They never did, but the hope lingered. Every coral reef, every new shore seemed a possible remnant. In the Caribbean, stories blossomed anew. Spanish chroniclers returning from the New World spoke of ruins deep in the jungles of Central America, stone temples older than memory, cities whose builders had vanished like ghosts. Some claimed these were the colonies of Atlantis' survivors, scattered across the world after the flood. The Aztecs told them of Aztlan, the ancestral homeland across the sea. The Maya spoke of cities drowned beneath the waves. Even the Incas whispered that their first king came from the waters, bearing knowledge from a world long gone. To the native storytellers, these were not myths. They were memories. Their voices echoed something older than empire, older even than recorded time. The memory of a dawn when the earth shifted and the sea devoured its own. The Atlantic wind carries such whispers still. Fishermen in the Azores speak of strange lights beneath the waves. Off Madeira, sonar reveals terraces shaped like steps, as if the ocean had once lapped at palace walls. Along the Moroccan coast, ancient harbours lie far inland, where the sea once reached and then withdrew. The world itself seems to carry fragments of a forgotten geometry, scattered and rearranged like pieces of a shattered mirror. Yet, what makes Atlantis endure is not the stones or the sea. It is the dream of what it represents. The story of a people who reached beyond their limits and vanished, leaving only beauty behind. A reminder that civilization, no matter how radiant, always stands on the edge of the abyss. Imagine then that the ocean remembers. Picture the abyssal plain, vast and silent, where no light has touched for 12,000 years. The sand is as fine as dust. A slow current drifts, and something glimmers faintly beneath it. An arc of bronze, half buried, the carving of a bird whose eyes were once set with gems. It lies forgotten, the emblem of a kingdom erased. Around it, coral creeps like ivy across the remains of columns and courtyards. Anemones bloom where statues once stood. Fish pass through doorways, silver and silent, as though visiting a temple of their ancestors. There is no sound here except the slow pulse of the sea. But if one could listen deeply enough, not with the ears, but with the mind, perhaps a rhythm could still be felt. The faint echo of drums, the chant of priests, and the hum of a city breathing beneath the stars. The ocean has not forgotten. It never does. Scholars today continue to seek Atlantis, though in different ways. Some look not for a place, but for patterns. They trace ancient maps, alignments of megaliths, genetic migrations, and myths that recur with uncanny similarity. They find that human memory is older than writing, that tales of floods and vanished lands appear in every cradle of civilization. Could it be that our species itself remembers that deep within our collective mind lies a scar from a time when the world nearly ended. When the last ice age died, vast sheets of ice collapsed into the sea. The oceans rose, swallowing coasts where millions had lived. In a matter of centuries, whole continents changed shape. The Black Sea flooded, the Persian Gulf filled, the shores of India and Southeast Asia sank beneath the waves. It was, by every measure, a global Atlantis. For those who survived, the memory of that drowning would have burned itself into story and song. A story that became myth, a myth that became legend. Perhaps, then, Plato's tale was not invention, but inheritance. A memory passed down through millennia, reshaped by each culture that carried it. Egypt's priests remembered a kingdom that fell. Greece inherited the tale, and Plato, seeking meaning in the ruins of his own age, used it to warn of moral decay. In that way, the memory survived by changing its face, wearing new names and drifting like the tide from truth to metaphor and back again. Even now, as scientists scan the seafloor with satellites and submersibles, the myth breathes between the data. Patterns emerge, grids, ridges, shapes that defy pure chance. Some are dismissed as tricks of geology, others remain unexplained, but the allure is the same. The possibility that beneath the indifferent ocean lies proof that once, long ago, humankind was not alone in its infancy, that somewhere before the written word, a people had already built and lost a world. There is beauty in that idea. It reminds us that history is not a straight line, but a tide, rising, falling, and returning. The lost golden age, the sudden flood, the scattering of survivors. These are the rhythms of human memory. Atlantis may be gone, but its pattern repeats. We see it in the ruins of Babylon, in the fall of Rome, and in the cities reclaimed by jungle and sand. Every civilization writes its own Atlantis, and every sea waits to tell it again. And so the story becomes a mirror. When Plato wrote of the Atlanteans' pride, he was writing of Athens. When we speak of Atlantis today, we are speaking of ourselves, of the dream of perfection and the fear of losing it. The myth endures because it is never only about the past. It is about the fragility of the present, about how easily light can sink into darkness. Perhaps that is why the ocean feels so familiar when we gaze upon it. Somewhere in its vast reflection, we see what was and what will be. The tide does not lie. It remembers all that falls into it. The ruins of Atlantis are not only stone, they are the echoes of every voice that ever believed itself beyond fate. But still, the mystery invites hope. What if the city sleeps, preserved beneath layers of silt, waiting for the world to remember it? What if, in the quietest hours of night, when the wind is still and the sea smooth as glass, the outline of its towers can still be seen, faint and fleeting beneath the moonlight?